If you grew up in a church, you undoubtedly know a few passages that you can pull out whenever the occasion calls for them. That's not always a negative thing. In fact, it sometimes works out for the best if we apply the passages to their correct context. Many people find it challenging to quote a passage without knowing what the verses around it signify. As a result, several widely used biblical texts have been misinterpreted. We will examine how these Bible verses are misused, as well as what they imply in context, for each of these incorrectly cited passages. Matthew 7 verse 1. Judge not, that ye be not judged. We all understand the words, but we are unaware of the context. This is one of the most misinterpreted biblical scriptures, because we completely took it out of context. It has taken on a kind of mantra status among individuals, who hold the view that we should all be allowed to live our lives without judging others. Many people use this passage as justification for not paying attention to the flaws that others point out in them. Yet, that completely misses the point. You should pay close attention when someone in your life makes a point. Every disciple of Jesus should be clearing their vision of obstructions in order to assist their brothers and sisters. For this reason, Jesus says this in Matthew 7 verses 3 to 5. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. We shouldn't accuse and criticize. That's what the religious did in Jesus' day. And that is of no one benefit. What we ought to do is stand by one another in love. Helping someone recognize the sin in their life is not judgment. Condemning them for that transgression rather than assisting them is judgment. There is a significant distinction between the two. Philippians 4 verse 13. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. This passage is frequently utilized by people as inspiration to get through difficult situations. It serves as our rallying cry whether trying to win a contest, get through a challenging exam, deal with a breakup, set a new personal best during a workout, or complete a project. Paul did not have it in mind when he penned this passage, though. This is what the context of this verse tells us, yet many people have missed it because they have only read this one verse. In reality, Paul is telling us to be joyful, whether we are starving or full, wealthy or poor, imprisoned or free. He claims that God will see him through the challenges that he places before him. Not that we can do everything we desire. Revelation 3 verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice, and open the door, I will come into him, and will sup with him, and he with me. We picture this as Jesus standing outside, an unbeliever's heart asking to come in. In other words, it's a passage that's addressed to the unbeliever. The problem is, this verse isn't addressed to the unbeliever. It's addressed to Christians. More specifically, it's addressed to a church. Revelation 3 verse 20 does not refer to Jesus wishing to enter the life of an unbeliever, as can be seen when we consider what is happening in the rest of Revelation 3. Instead, it is about how we as Christians may grow cold and assume we are self-sufficient. As a result, Jesus is pushed outside and left to stand outside the door. This passage portrays Jesus as knocking on the door of a Christian's heart, asking to enter. Matthew 18 verse 20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. This scripture is sometimes misinterpreted to mean that God is present if there are 2 or more people in the room. When we interpret the text in this way, it implies that God is absent when there are less than 2 people. Although most people probably don't think that way, that's how some individuals interpret this passage. If we were to read the surrounding verses in Matthew 18, we would see a different message. Jesus is actually giving instructions on what to do when we have a conflict with a person. When we have a disagreement with someone, we should go with other people. It's not about how many people need to be present for God to be with them. Rather, practical advice on how to handle conflict. All we have to do is read a few more passages to understand the real meaning. So what is the point? We can see how crucial it is to read the Bible in context by looking at these typical verses taken out of context. In other words, you may learn a lot about a verse by looking at the passages that come before and after it. If you neglect the context, your understanding of the Bible is likely to become distorted. One of the most important aspects of biblical interpretation is a verse's context. Also, it's one of the simpler tasks. Looking at the context of what is said simply takes a few seconds. The intended meaning of the passage would be clear if we gave the above passages just a little more attention. This isn't just a principle for biblical interpretation. Imagine if you actually read that article, rather than jumping to conclusions based on a one-sentence soundbite. It tells us the whole story. If you take a sentence out of context, you can make anyone say anything you want. That's the danger of taking scripture out of context. You can make the Bible say anything you want if you ignore the context. We have to pay attention to the context of the Bible. The next time you read the Bible, slow down and look at the context in which the verses you are reading are set in. What verse would you add to this list of common Bible verses taken out of context? Leave a comment below.